My name is Kavya and I am the course trainer in Northeast Skill Center. First of all, I just want to give a brief introduction about what is Northeast Skill Center about. So it is a institute which has been set up by Assam Skill Development Mission, and it is in collaboration with the Institute of Technical Education Singapore, and it aims to be one of the premier regional skill training center for the northeast region of India, and which is under the purview of Skill Employment and Entrepreneurship Department, Government of Assam. And in NEC, we are offering a one-year course in four specific trades, which is retail services, beauty and wellness, hospitality, food and beverage services, hospitality operations, housekeeping. And so this is just a brief introduction. And today we have our guest Chandramita Biporua. And on behalf of Northeast Skills Center, we welcome.
Today we are going to talk about the importance of mental well-being during COVID-19 pandemic. So when we talk about mental well-being, we can also talk about, well-being as mental wellness, as mental health, and so on. So mental health is a very important area to talk about, which we often miss out or we hesitate to talk about. But it is equally important to talk about mental health just as we talk about physical health. So now trying to understand what does the term health means. When people usually ask us, how is your health today or how you have been for the past few days, we usually think about, in terms of physical health. No doubt physical health is also an important aspect or an important component of the overall health. But apart from physical health, there are other aspects, too, which we also need to consider, and that will be clear when we talk about the definition as given by World Health Organization in 1948, where it states that health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So World Health Organization emphasizes that when you talk about health, you have to talk about health in terms of your physical well-being, in terms of your mental well-being, in terms of social well-being. And it does not simply indicate that if there is absence of disease or if there is absence of physical or mental weakness, then only the person is meant to be healthy. No, rather when we talk about health, there has to be well-being in the three aspects, that is physical, mental and social. Now, as we are stressing here today on mental health, what is mental health and how can we understand a person's mental health? So mental health affects a person, the way a person is going to think, the way a person is going to feel and the way the person is going to act. Mental health also gets reflected in the way people are handling the various stressors in their life, in the interpersonal relatedness with others and also the overall functioning. World Health Organization has also put forth a definition on mental health which will clarify what does mental health indicate. So according to WHO, mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So from this definition, we can understand that mental health indicates your functioning in three major areas, that is your personal functioning, your occupational functioning and your social functioning. So now trying to understand the mental health scenario that of India, and for this a wide survey was done by NIMHANS, and the name of the survey is National Mental Health Survey, which was done in 2015-16. It was a large epidemiological study that was conducted in 12 states across 6 regions in India. And this mental health survey has provided a good idea, a fair idea of how mental health looks, or the picture of the mental health in India. So according to the survey, around 150 million people, or 15 crore people, they are in need of both short term or long term mental health care services. So we can really understand how many people in our country, they are in need of mental health services. Then again, this survey also points out that the overall prevalence for any mental morbidity above the age of 18 years was 10.6%. So when we talk about prevalence, it refers to the proportion of a particular population which is found to be affected by a illness or disease at a specific time, and the survey found the percentage to be 10.6, and that is quite a number. And that particular statistic, it gives us a fair idea that how many people are suffering from mental health conditions in our country. Then the survey has also found that the lifetime prevalence in the surveyed population was 13.7%. That is another huge number. So when we talk about lifetime prevalence, what does it mean? So lifetime prevalence, is the proportion of a population that at some point in their life has experienced a particular health event, disease, and so on. Now another important fact that was stated by the survey is that on the treatment gap. So the treatment gap for mental health conditions or mental disorders, they ranged between 70% and 92% for different disorders. So when we try to understand about treatment gap, so treatment gap basically refers to the number of people who are affected by an illness, disease, or disorder, and they are in need of treatment but they are not getting the treatment. So this survey gives us a fair idea, and it was one of the biggest surveys that was done, and it has given a fair epidemiological idea, epidemiology of the mental health conditions in India. Then talking about COVID-19 and how it impacts on our mental well-being or on our mental health, we all know that coronavirus or COVID-19 is an infectious disease which is caused by a newly discovered virus called SARS-CoV-2. Now most people who are affected by this virus, they will experience or are likely to experience mild to moderate respiratory problems. But if we see those affected persons who are older and those who are suffering from various medical conditions or various health conditions such as diabetes, cancer, they are vulnerable to develop severity of this illness. So when as COVID-19, it was declared by the World Health Organization as a pandemic, many countries, they went into lockdown, and it had created a wave of uncertainty amongst people. And when there is uncertainty and when we do not know what is happening or how things are going to be, so it obviously causes a stress in us. It obviously leads to various problems within us, and we can experience those. So now the question is, are those the common responses to COVID-19 pandemic? Are those normal? Is it normal to respond in that way? So let us have a look at it. So if we look in this slide, we can see that what are the common responses, or what can be the common responses to COVID-19 pandemic. They can be fear and anxiety, they can be uncertainties about the present and future, feeling sad or low, becoming distracted, or having the difficulty in concentration, difficulty in sleeping or relaxing, frustration or anger, feeling isolated. So we can have this kind of reactions to the current situation, and it is not nothing bad in it, it is not nothing wrong in it. We can have, because it is natural. It is, when there is any stressful situation, it is natural to respond in this way. And when there is a, situation like a pandemic where people are uncertain what is going to happen in their life, people are uncertain, what the future beholds for them. This are the normal responses, that you will see many people have experienced during this pandemic. Now, why do we respond in this way? What can be the probable reasons if we see in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic? First is loss of life. We have seen many people, losing their lives, many people losing their loved ones. So we have seen it. Then again, there has been drastic changes in our way of living, because we are not able to go out, or carry out our normal daily activities, and the workplace and our personal space, they have been now come together. So there has been a lot of changes in the way we used to live. So we are now all trying to adjust to what is called the new normal. Now, third is physical distancing. Here, I have emphasized on the word physical distancing than social distancing, because even the word social distancing also indicates that, you need to maintain that distance or space, between one another, or that physical gap between one another, or physical distance between one another, so that this transmission of this coronavirus can be contained. So I have not used the word social distancing, because many might feel that, we may not be able to talk with people, or can we connect with others? Definitely you can, because nowadays we all have a telephone or a laptop where we can, connect with others. We can call our loved ones, we can call our friends, we can have chats with them, we can have conversations with them, we can have video calls with them. So definitely we can remain connected virtually with our loved ones, definitely. Now, going on to that, when there is a stressful situation, just as the pandemic, so a question obviously comes to our mind, that why am I experiencing this and others are not experiencing this, or why am I experiencing more fear and my other family members are not experiencing so much of fear? So we have to understand that every individual, they will react to any stressful situation in a very different manner. So that has to be very much well understood. No two individual are going to respond in the exact same manner. There will be variations, and this depends on the level of sensitivity each individual has, as well as the past experiences. The past experiences is also going to determine, together the level of sensitivity and the past experiences will determine the way a person is going to respond to any stressful situation. Now, I have given an example here, where you can see that someone who has a fear of flying will obviously react strongly while being on an airplane than when that person is in another situation. Take for example, the person is in a situation where there is a fire at home. So in that situation, it is not that the person will react in the same way. So we have to understand what kind of fear the person is having. Maybe in the past experience he had a bad experience while flying in an airplane, and there was turbulence on the flight. So maybe after that, when he used to board an airplane, he always used to have that fear. Then what if again this happens? So maybe his reaction while being on a plane will obviously be more stronger than when he is in another situation. So we have to understand that no two persons are going to react to a stressor or a stressful situation in the same manner. Now, we also need to consider that, what are the vulnerable populations, or who are the vulnerable people who are going to, strongly respond to stress, or more likely to respond to stress when it comes to COVID-19. So, basically, those who are obviously at a higher risk for severe illness from COVID-19, they will obviously strongly react or respond to stress. Then children and teenagers, those who are caregivers, frontline workers, people with existing mental illness or psychiatric illness, then people using various substances or with substance use disorder, people with physical or intellectual disabilities, and people who also have lost their jobs or who have had major changes in their employment. So this particular groups of people that have been mentioned here, they are obviously more likely to strongly respond to the stress. Then moving on to some commonly seen psychiatric illnesses or mental illnesses that can be seen during this time, and they are depression, or I have mentioned here clinical depression or major depressive disorder. So there are two classificatory systems. One is World Health Organization's ICD-10 and APA's DSM-5. So they have mentioned slight variations in the way they mention about depression. And in ICD we have depression mentioned as mild, moderate and severe depressive episode, and in DSM-5 we have mentioned as major depressive disorder. So when we talk about depression, we have to understand that it is different from sadness. We all know that we do become sad at some point of time due to some reasons where we are not able to tolerate the pain or the discomfort that we are having in our life, and we do become sad. But sadness is something which is temporary and it passes with time. But in depression, no doubt we have pervasive or consistent sadness, which is an important feature of clinical depression. But along with that, other areas of life are also very much affected, and we have to understand that depression is a mental illness, and it is treatable, and we need to seek advice from a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist, and we need to visit the mental health professionals. So if we look at how depression is going to affect us, in what areas of life and in what ways. So here a few points are being mentioned where we can see that the person will lose interest in his daily activities. The daily activities will seem to be more challenging for those persons. Even waking up and even going for a bath, even self-dressing will become a challenge for that person. Even getting up from bed can be a challenge from that person. Then there will be reduced energy can be seen, and increased fatigability can also be seen in the person. Then there will be reduced concentration and self-confidence. Then ideas or acts of self-harm or suicide can also be there, and we have to be very, very, very sensitive, because recently we know that the suicide of one famous celebrity, Sushant Singh Rajput, has shaken the entire country, and it is a huge loss. And it is really sad that he took such a life-threatening decision. So when somebody talks about that I don't want to live anymore, there is nothing in my life to live for, I want to die, please be serious and please ask the person to consult a mental health professional. So here today I just want to say a bit about suicide, that how do we assess about suicide, we as mental health professionals. So when somebody tells about suicide, we need to dig in, we need to ask certain questions, and basically we would initially try to assess the frequency of suicidal thoughts. So we would ask recently, have you any thoughts about harming yourself or killing yourself? And if the person says yes, then we would ask how frequently are you having these thoughts in a day, or or for how many days in a week. So we need to know how frequently those thoughts are coming to the person's mind. Then we also need to assess about the plan, whether the person is making some kind of active planning, or how to carry out the suicide or go on about the suicide. And if the plan seems to be very detailed, and that yes, this plan is possible, this person can carry it out, we need to immediately take that person to a psychiatrist, and we need to immediately take that person to a mental health professional, definitely. Then it is also important that we also ask about past suicidal behavior. So if we get history about that, yes, there was a failed suicidal attempt by the person, and we do need to take details about it, in what ways the person has tried, the time, and after getting all of it, we have to understand that when there is past suicidal behavior, it is obviously one of the strongest risk factor for future attempts. So we immediately need to consider taking that person to a mental health professional. So that's why we cannot take when a person talks about suicide or harming himself or herself, or so we need to be very considerate, we need to be very sensitive, and we should not just avoid such things, or just take it very lightly. Now, going on to another spectrum, where we will talk about anxiety disorders. And anxiety disorders, there are many kinds of anxiety disorders. So here I have commonly listed down some of the symptoms which if you see in your near or dear one, then you can obviously feel that this person needs some help now, and we should take him or her to a mental health professional. So there can be shortness of breath, there can be palpitations, there can be dry mouth, there can be nausea, there can be excessive worry, persistent irrational fears, restlessness, disturbed sleep. So we need to look out the signs for, maybe if at some point of time, if you also see certain signs, this kind of signs within yourself, and you can really feel the discomfort, the suffering, and if it is persistent, and your functioning is being daily functioning is being disturbed by all these signs, then you should definitely seek out help. Then here we will also talk about another mental health condition which we can see when there is a crisis, or when there is a natural disaster, and so on. So that is known as post-traumatic stress disorder, which one can develop after one has witnessed or experienced a traumatic or terrifying event in which serious physical harm had occurred or was threatened. So the various reasons can be, suppose untimely death of a loved one or a dear one, or there has been physical or sexual assault, or there has been an accident or natural disaster, and so on. So due to this condition, there can be various features that can be seen, or signs and symptoms that can be seen in a person, and they are: the person may re-experience the traumatic event again and again through nightmares or by having flashbacks. Then the person may avoid people, places that reminds him or her of that traumatic event. Then there can be increased arousal, the person may get easily startled. Then they may have difficulty in expressing emotions, they may have difficulty in falling asleep, there can be irritability, anger outbursts, and so on. So when we see such signs and symptoms within a person, and it has affected their daily living to a significant extent, then it is time that we seek professional help, and we take them to a mental health professional. Now here I have mentioned certain healthy ways of coping with the current pandemic situation. So the first is, do not overwhelm yourself too much with information related to COVID-19. No doubt we need to be updated about what is happening in our region, in our country, in the entire world. But it is not that every time we need to keep on viewing anything related to COVID-19, because this can overwhelm us and stress us out. So we should limit viewing any information related to COVID-19. We can have some schedule that maybe morning for 1 hour I see information or news related to COVID-19, and maybe evening for 1 hour. So in that way you are updated, as well as you are not overwhelming yourself with too much of information. Then another point is structuring your daily activities, because our our daily day-to-day functioning has completely changed, because we are now staying at home. Even our workplace has been set up at home, so there are many changes, and maybe the regular activities we are not able to carry out as we used to do earlier. But if you structure out your daily schedule, or if you schedule your daily activities, it often helps you where you can incorporate maybe your own work, then maybe some kind of hobby, or maybe some kind of exercise, or relaxation, and so on, so that for you the day becomes very fulfilling. And when you structure it out, we are able to divide the task and fulfill them. Then engaging in some form of physical exercise. Physical exercise is always recommended, because it is one way to keep you healthy. And when one engages in physical exercise, there is a release of hormones called endorphins that makes you feel good. So when one engages in physical exercise, it is it calms your mind, and it makes you feel good. And it is also an important requirement to keep yourself very healthy. So yes, in the next point there is remain connected. Yes, do not isolate yourself, do not shut yourself away from expressing your feelings. You talk it out, maybe you call up your friends, or your near your dear ones, have a conversation with them, share your feelings, talk about it, discuss about things, and have a good time. Recall your childhood memories, recall the good memories, so that you feel good and you have some good time. Now the next is look for errors in your cognition. Definitely, we can make mistakes while we are interpreting an event, while we are analyzing something. And if there are cognitions, we will also analyze in an wrong manner. So we know right now there are many what ifs in our life. What if I contact this disease? What if someone of my family contacts this disease? What is going to happen? So this what ifs, and these are difficult answers to find. So we have to first understand what is in my control right now. Am I thinking of those things which are not under my control? Because certain things are not under my control. On the other hand, certain things are also under my control. So in this situation, we know that we can be safe, or we can restrict, or we can so we have to realize the way we are thinking, is it helping us? Is it giving that comfort to us? So then we need to realize that no, this thinking or these thoughts are not helpful for me, and I need to replace them, so that I can reason things out. I can understand that no, this is actually an error, and I need to replace them with more healthy cognitions or healthy thinking. Now the next is be empathetic towards others. So this is a very sensitive time. During this time we should not refer to those people who are affected by COVID-19 as COVID-19 cases and so on, because it might definitely make them feel bad. So be empathetic and sensitive in the kind of terms you're using to refer people. And also be kind, and also at this time be more understanding towards others. Then the last point here is practicing mindfulness. And yes, when we talk about mindfulness, it is about being at the moment, being in the present, and consciously be at this moment without any kind of judgment, without any kind of evaluation. Now practicing mindfulness, teaching in this small amount of time, it will not be very easy, but yes, we can also incorporate mindfulness in our day-to-day activities. And now how can we do that? So take for example, you're washing dishes. Okay, so what you can do is you can take each dish in your hand, and you can consciously put an effort to wash them. You don't make any hurry, and as you are washing each dish, you also follow your breathing. Okay, so in that way your mind is not going to wander off to some other direction, and you will be completely in that moment. So this is one way where you can use mindfulness in your daily activity. Then you can also use mindfulness while you're cleaning the house. So take for example, you can divide your tasks into smaller manageable ones. Take for example, you want to uh, clean the bookshelf, you want to clean the toilet, you want to clean the kitchen, and so on. So take for example, here we take about cleaning of the bookshelf. So maybe you are or placing books on the bookshelf. So maybe you are putting the book one by one, and you are looking at the book, and you're deciding on which place the book will be kept at. You're reading the name of the book, and then immersing yourself into it. So being there, being at that moment, rather than placing the books randomly and thinking about something else. So when we talk about mindfulness, we neither focus on the past nor on the future, but we truly try to remain in the present. So these are certain, general ways of coping with the current pandemic situation. Now, there are certain strategies also given where, which can be used by caregivers in taking care of their children. So, even this pandemic has not only affected, us, but also children. All groups of population are being affected by the current situation. So when it comes to taking care of children, we need to keep certain things in mind, because the way we are going to analyze, interpret things, children may not be able to do so. So we should not hush things about the pandemic. Rather, we should talk it out with our children, but in ways which are age appropriate to them. Okay, so we also need to understand that the terms we are using, the way we are trying to make them understand, it should be appropriate for their age. We should also keep in mind the way we are trying to cope. Children are actually observing us and learning from it. So we have to be very cautious in how we are behaving. Then even we can understand, or it is now common that all children are homebound. They are not able to carry out their daily activities. They are not going to school anymore. They are having online classes rather, and they are not going out for even play. So within the four walls, we need to create such a routine where the child also gets some time to play, to carry out certain activities which is also important for the child. So, and we also need to make it a point that we take some time out to play with our child, to involve them involve them even in small household activities, so that they also remain busy, and they also feel that and there is no such problem, and they can be asked to do certain small simple household chores. So during this pandemic, they may need the physical comfort from their caregivers or their parents more. So we also have to understand that, because children do need to feel safe and secure, and they may demand for the physical comfort more from the caregivers. And we should also allow children to express their feelings through different ways, because just as adults are more comfortable in verbalizing their issues, in verbalizing their feelings, children are more comfortable to express through play. So we have to make them engage, or we should try to engage them in drawing, in building blocks, and so on, so that they also can express through their own mode. So now we will talk about how older adults or people who are taking care of the elderly population, or people with underlying medical conditions, how can they cope with the pandemic. So for elderly people or for older people, they can learn simple daily physical exercise at home, so that they can maintain movement or mobility, and it can help to reduce their boredom. So there are even certain basic yoga where where they can do anulom vilom, and so on. Very simple exercise, not complicated, so that they can also feel that they are doing something and be healthy at the same time. Then the information that is being shared to elderly people or older adults, we need to keep in mind that it comes in a very simple and understandable form. And they might ask you again and again, okay, is it so, what, why is it so? Okay, so be have that patience, and repeat information if it is necessary. Now again, there may be certain people who may have cognitive impairment, or they may be suffering from dementia, so they may display certain signs. They might be anxious, they might be angry, and there may be restlessness also. So during such situation, provide the emotional support to them, as well as contact the required contact mental health professionals to address those issues. And again, create or restructure the daily schedule, just as I said that, allow them to have some kind of physical exercise, allow them to maybe help them connect with their friends, or someone with whom they would like to talk. So so that schedule the day in a way that it also means to them, or seems to them very fulfilling. So in case of any health emergency, you need to keep certain important contact numbers healthy, so that at least you can have a teleconsultation or call up the numbers when and reach out immediately. Now those people who are also in isolation or quarantine, because health professionals, health authorities, they may ask one to limit their physical contact to contain the pandemic. So for such people, those who are in isolation or quarantine, do not refrain yourself from expressing your feelings. You stay connected, and with your loved ones, call them up, have a video call or a chat in WhatsApp or email and so on, but remain connected and express your feelings, and there is no do not shy away from expressing your feelings, because we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to understand that if we're having any difficulty within us, we need to talk it out, and when required or when necessary, we need to take the necessary professional help. So thank you. At the end, we need to be very sensitive when people are going to share such problems, that I'm having this problem, what should I do? So do not shut them away. Ask them to ask them to talk it out about it, and help them if you can, or ask them to take some professional advice when necessary. So thank you so much. It was a wonderful it was wonderful to have such participants who are very patient and who have been listening for quite some time. So there has been a few questions which I think I would like to answer them now. So is claustrophobia an anxiety disorder? Yes, it is one kind of anxiety disorder, and it would fall under specific phobias, where people they are scared of enclosed spaces. And the next is, ma'am, how to talk in group being an introvert. See, when you talk about being an introvert, it doesn't mean that you don't socialize. Okay, you might be socializing with selective people, but it doesn't mean that you are an introvert and you that's why you're having this problem. But maybe that you are having some kind of difficulty in initiating conversation, or some kind of maybe an anxiety that if you say something, how others are going to judge you, or take you. So basically, when you want to initiate or start, if initially I feel that you go to a person whom you feel that you're comfortable with, then start having a conversation with him or her, and try talking about, because during this pandemic also, even if you're going to call up people, they're not going to shut you away. They are also going to feel good about it, because we all are going through a tough time. So if you have difficulty in having a one-to-one conversation, you can call up a person, initiate a conversation, and then maybe slowly, once you uh, familiarize yourself, with the members of the group which you are, talking about, then maybe once you're comfortable, then you can go in person and have a, start initiating a talk with them. Then there is, also a question that what are the warning signs and risk factors that older adults and adults with disabilities may be experiencing, emotional stress or anxiety. So, when you see certain behavioral changes, you see that the person is becoming irritable, the person is becoming restless, the person is not being able to eat properly, sleep properly. So, this can be some of the, signs or risk factors that the person may be having some trouble. And then maybe you can have a conversation, ask the person, how he or she is feeling, what has been disturbing him or her. And if this persists for some time, and if the person is in, great distress, then please consult a mental health professional. Another question where, uh, someone has asked that, can we balance mental and physical health by exercise? Yes, exercise is an important way of, having a healthy lifestyle, or, a healthy living. Yes, exercise is important, but we also need to consider other aspects of our life as well, that, how we are, do we have any stressors in our life, or are we taking too much of tension, or so everything, many aspects of our life have to be considered, particularly as as it was given in the definition of WHO, where very well or very broadly or comprehensively mental health was being described. So you need to see that, are you having any trouble in your personal life, are you having any trouble in your social life, or are you having any trouble in your occupational, area. So if you feel that, those areas are, you are, doing quite well, then I don't think that there is any issue. But if you feel that any one area, or, the overall functioning, is getting somewhat difficult, or you can feel some discomfort, then definitely, you do need to go for a consultation, or think about, talking with a mental health professional. So thank you everyone, it was really nice, and thank you for all the queries that you all have, and thank you so much.